So I was thinking about various topics I could do for a video, and it randomly just came across me. I was going through some of my books, and I noticed that there is a Shōnen Jump, like this singular volume of Shōnen Jump that we had lying around the house. I think it's the only one I've ever purchased, honestly. And I was wondering, how popular is Shōnen Jump as a brand to this day? Because I know way back when it was really popular, and Shōnen genres are still extremely popular, so one would think that it'd still be one of the biggest magazines in graphic novels for Japan. And is that the case? So I decided to look into that topic. And here's what I found. So back in the 1990s, Shōnen Jump had 6.5 million regularly purchased issues. That's a lot of sales. But then when you take 2017 into account, they're currently below 2 million regularly purchased issues, according to Anime News Network, from an article a while back. I'll probably do my best to find the link and put that in the description. And well, you have to wonder, is this a matter of Shōnen Jump's popularity, or is it a result of the print apocalypse? For those who aren't aware of what the print apocalypse was about, you know how during, if you were in school, they had these little events where you would try to sell magazines to people, and whoever got the most magazine sales would win prizes. Like, to get points, and then you would be able to get prizes. Sometimes it was to get some kind of a deduction off of a school trip. Sometimes it was like getting like one of those shitty hand fans. But point is, the reason that became relevant is because people weren't reading magazines all that often. In fact, people aren't really even reading books that often, and like the physical prints of them. This has caused a lot of English teachers to say that nobody's reading anymore, which isn't the case. It's more a matter of that people are going digital, so a lot of what people read is now online. So like, for example, if you own a Kindle, you can buy books via the Kindle, and you can read them digitally instead of having to buy the physical book in a library or at a bookstore and then read it. Some people are ordering the physical books, but they're doing it via Amazon or some other website that ships to your location. And then even other people are using Amazon audiobooks, and they're interacting with the book that way. Instead of having to read it, they don't have time to sit down and do it, so while they're driving around, they can hear that in the background. So people have a variety of ways they can choose to consume literature, to the point where they don't need the prints exclusively to experience them, which years ago that wasn't the case. These types of options weren't widely spread back in the early 90s. So print apocalypse basically means that sales went down. So America's magazine industry was hit by this really hard a few years ago. The culprit is electronics, as I was just thinking. So when you have Netflix, Crunchyroll, YouTube, and other services for streaming videos, shows, and series, the demand for televised broadcasting goes down. Just like the demand for physical prints of literature and magazines will go down. Book sales, magazine sales, and any other printed sales are less convenient to most than just getting an app on their phone or visiting a website on their computer and interacting with the same works. Just electronically this time. Shōnen Jump may have been reported on in the article, but they are not the only ones affected. Other magazines have gone down in sales too, with smaller ones going out of print altogether. This is a similar bias that came about due to Blizzard's World of Warcraft going down in sales. So you look at the sales charts for it, you notice that it went up when it came out, then it went up when they had the second expansion, then Wrath of the Lich King was its peak, and then for each expansion after that, it started making less money. This caused a lot of articles to be written, I've only seen them electronically, I'm sure they exist elsewhere, stating things along the line of World of Warcraft no longer being the king of MMORPGs, which is not true if you compare its numbers, its average player population to that of any other game that you can find a feasible way of tracking player base, at least the active player base, World of Warcraft is still king. It's just there's not as much of a gap between the second place and third place entries as there was in previous years. Now they're a lot closer in competition. They still have a huge advantage, and it's going to take them years before they actually have to worry about going out of business and closing down servers because they're not making enough money. But the point is, they're not needing that peak. They're not getting back up to that peak yet. And there could be a variety of factors as to why this is the case. So many, in fact, that it would require its own video, so I'll probably do that in the future. You can see exactly what caused the huge downfall of all of the factors. The thing is, the drop in player base happened to World of Warcraft's competitors as well. Why buy physical copies of works that take up space and must be in stock or shipped to your location when you could just buy the series on Bookwalker, which is a new service? And I'm not backed by Bookwalker. There's no sponsorship here. I'm mentioning them because it's the topic of the video, and they just so happen to be a website that I found that sells ebooks. So you can go online, you can find books, graphic novels from Japan or any other country on their site. It's just there. It's a service, just like audiobook. Not backed by anyone. Just, they exist. It's the topic of the video. Chill. You know, unless you are a collector or just really prefer to have physical copies of such possessions, your average person would probably be using a mixture of these services because you choose whichever way you want to digest your content. So while there are many people who might be choosing audiobooks, Bookwalker, or to interact with graphic novels illegally that were in manners that don't give any kind of profit to the author or the artist. But you know, there are also people who are collectors, in which case, good for you. The point isn't that one way is superior or inferior, except for illegally digesting the content. Because if you're not giving any money back to the person, do you like not getting paid for the work you do? No? It's kind of a side complaint, but I'll have a go at it. Regularly published magazines tend to use cheap newsprint. The result is ink coming off on my hands while I'm reading. This is not exclusively a Shōnen Jump complaint. Most regularly published magazines that I have gotten in my possession do this. This includes Game Informer. There are upsides to products going digital. You don't have the printing costs anymore, so that could mean more money for the artists, you know, unless contracts somehow chip them out of that. Assuming consumers are experiencing the content through legal sources. Note that less print sales does not mean that the graphic novel industry is dying in Japan, or anywhere else really, or that animated adaptations of those works are going to be threatened by this change in consumption of the medium. You don't believe me? Here are the numbers. This list covers sales from November 23rd of 2015 to November 20th of 2016. This is provided by Anime News Network, a link in the description, so you can follow along with me if you so choose. One Piece, 12 million units. Assassination Classroom, nearly 7 million units. Kingdom, about 6.5 million units. Attack on Titan, about 6.5 million units. Haikyuu, Seven Deadly Sins, My Hero Academia, One Punch Man, Erased. Heck, even the top 30 entry on the sales list sold over 1.6 million units. Think about that, even the top 30. This versus the industry sales from top novels 20 years ago, according to Oricon. Detective Conan in 1998 sold 719,850 units. It was the best seller, the number one best-selling graphic novel at that time. Although this could be a result of it just being less popular as a series compared to current shonen or other ongoing series of our time, as it's still going on today and started 3 years prior to One Piece, and it's sold less than half of what One Piece's current units are. However, remember, it is number one. That still means a lot, and it's selling less than 1 million units. Meanwhile, the top 30 are all over 1 million units sold. Another key comparison would be Flame of Recca, which sold 250,000, and it was at 10th highest sold for that year. Shonen Jump is still a strong label for the graphic novel industry in Japan, and graphic novels are still selling well. Case closed. Except, no. The advantage to physical products is that you can only display them in a store, where people can easily come across them. We know that this works because grocery stores that put milk as far away from the entrance as possible produce higher sales figures than those that don't. Not even going to source that. It's such an old example that it's not even culturally relevant. Do you have a milkman? Didn't think so. What this means for the graphic novel industry is the same as what it means for new YouTube personalities. It is difficult to get noticed on the platform, since you would have to know a new series exists in order to search it up. Getting new works exposed to a broad number of consumers can be difficult. You go into YouTube, you see what's trending. Generally, whoever's getting the most activity on their videos is shown before anything else. So if some new content creator in the similar genre to another YouTuber starts doing vlogs, for example, the most popular, in other words, the most active consumer base around a certain personality that does vlogs is going to generally come up first, not that new content creator. Well, it's the same with digital works for novels. Since you would have to know the new novel exists to search it up, getting a new work exposed in broad numbers of consumers is difficult. This has changed how animated adaptations work to a point. Instead of waiting for a series to become popular, then deciding to adapt it, animation studios are adapting new works as soon as possible in the hopes that they can get big. So, instead of episode development cycles of One Piece, Bleach, Dragon Ball Z, and Naruto, where the series never seems to end and just goes on forever and ever and ever, and it makes people not want to actually watch the show because they get intimidated by that number that's mostly filler. We are going to see more animated series be treated like My Hero Academia, where the episodes are adapted into seasons with breaks in between to let the artist produce more material before the animation studio takes on more adaptations of that work. This should cut down on the amount of filler and padding present in adaptations, and it means more animations per season in the long run, since more animation studios are going to have relevant material to adapt, since any of them could become popular, either because the animation is just handled well or because the source material is that good. Sounds like an advantageous setup to me. So, is Shonen Jump less popular? It depends on your point of view. If you compare Shonen Jump sales to other magazines, the drops are reflected across the medium. With this outlook, it is magazines that are less popular, in other words, physical prints, not the Shonen Jump brand label. From another view, Shonen Jump isn't selling as well, and as a magazine, its popularity would be largely influenced by units sold. With numbers dropping, Shonen Jump is viewable as less popular. What are your thoughts on the topic? That's it for me. I'll have other videos in the works, so until next time, stay cool, my noobs.